Tonight's video dives into the most explosive turning point yet. Dani peels back a trail of erased invoices, broken camera feeds, and synced backups to expose a chilling plot against Bill, one woven from jealousy, money, and the hunger to control. As evidence stacks up, Hayley's carefully curated image fractures, Randy recalibrates the story to survive, and Bill is forced to confront the unthinkable truth that his life was treated like a line item on a spreadsheet. We're unpacking the motives that lit the fuse, the betrayals that cut the deepest, and the impossible choices that push every character to the edge. Is Hayley the architect or only the spark? Did Randy act alone, or is there a hidden hand pulling the strings? And can Dani's chain of proof withstand the counterattack that's already building? Settle in, because this breakdown maps every clue, every misstep, and every consequence that will decide who falls, who fights, and who walks away from the wreckage. In the suffocating air of an evening that should have been calm, Dani stepped into the vortex of truths hidden for far too long, where curving lines of data, faint invoices, and forgotten backups converged to scream a brutal story. Her anger did not erupt like a flame, it seeped like acid, corroding what remained of trust. Strange transaction headers, security camera windows cut at precise times, a seamless call history between Hayley and Randy in the hours before Bill's near-fatal accident. Each detail struck Dani like a chain of anchors dragging reason below the surface. She suppressed the urge to tear everything apart and instead forced her mind to sit, to thread fragments into a coherent line, to accept a conclusion she could no longer deny. This was not randomness, this was the architecture of a plot. When the body grasped it before the mind, her heart gave a silent roar at the humiliation of betrayal. Amid the haze of suppositions, Dani saw clearly the bare engines disguised behind gentle smiles. Hayley, once a shade tree of care, revealed fissures of jealousy and ambition trimmed into the shape of moral language. Randy, who understood the system's weak joints, wagered on time and insurance like a cold-blooded speculator. The realization chilled Dani. Bill's accident was not the slip of fate but an option inside a two-pronged plan, where poison and sabotaged brakes were merely variants of a single intention. She forced herself to face the crueler question: if Bill's life had once been measured as a number in a spreadsheet, then what did her position, her loyalty, their shared memories truly weigh? She did not call the police immediately, not from fear of being wrong, but from fear the drag of procedure would be the hourglass dropping its final grain on a human life. She quietly pulled Bill out of the noise, hid him inside the silence of a contingency. In choosing that, Dani instantly shouldered the shadow of suspicion. Anyone stepping off the usual axis becomes a suspect, and she knew it better than anyone. Yet that fear was crushed beneath the weight of a fury demanding redress. She downloaded backups, scheduled deliveries to the family attorney, and locked an automatic release mechanism in case everything slipped out of control. There, in that instant, she recognized her anger had shifted from raw emotion to survival strategy, a tool to tame chaos with ice-cold logic. Within the vice of choices, Bill became the center of a deranged chessboard. A man with a history of wrestling private failures into a semblance of safety, he had built refuges from the rubble of trust more than once. But what refuge stands after a knife from behind? The gratitude in his gaze only increased the moral burden on Dani. Every decision dragged a fresh ethical invoice: keep quiet to protect Bill, or expose the truth and trigger greater disaster for the entire family, gamble on the law's protection or believe the black market rules always run faster than statutes. For the first time, Dani felt the cruelty of adulthood, choosing between two wrongs, each with a separate toll on the soul. Hayley, at another extreme, was expelled from the soft shell used to hide her desire for control. As evidence began to surface like shards of glass glittering under the lights of an interview room, she experienced anger the way anyone on the verge of losing everything does. It did not blast outward, it mutated into self-exoneration, into a narrative of victimhood, into blame for Randy, for everyone, for the world's indifference to her struggle to rise. But that defensive anger is a double-edged blade. The more she denied, the deeper she sank into contradictions, where every negation bred another wrinkle to explain away. In the night, as she lulled herself with the promise that it was all a misunderstanding, her heartbeat still pounded at the thought that once secrets are hauled into daylight, they lose the meaning they had in darkness. Randy played it differently. He did not wrestle with ethics, he priced risk. Pinned between timestamped digital proof and the possibility of narrative manipulation, he chose the shortest path to survival: delete what could be deleted, restructure the record, and build an alternate story with Dani as villain. That intention revealed a desiccated anger, without flame or tears, only the arithmetic of survival. Randy knew that if he could pivot suspicion toward Dani, he could purchase a golden hour for a new contingency, and a golden hour is always enough for someone like him to slip beyond the horizon of accountability. But Dani's intelligent rage was a step ahead. Before anyone could circulate a counterfeit version of the truth, she hammered a legal timestamp into place with an automated email cascade. A belt and suspenders shield both moral and procedural. The further she waded into detail, the more unsettled she felt. Each proof pinning Hayley and Randy was also a needle driven into the memory fold where she had once tried to see something redeemable in them. This stopped feeling like an investigation and became a secession from personal illusions, a clandestine tribunal where Dani was plaintiff and defendant at once, with conscience as the only judge. When authorities began to stir, the air itself shifted. Their presence was more than protocol, it was a bell tolling for reckoning. In the buzz of witnesses and spreadsheets, Bill seemed strangely small. He understood his life had been weighed against someone else's profit, and such knowledge did not soothe nerves already scorched. Instead, it ripped open a new seam: faith in the future. How does one rebuild a future after realizing the past was a stage for deception? Dani did not answer for him, she could not answer for herself. She only knew that unless she drew a sharp line now, she would lose herself inside a game where the only prize is numbness. The next day did not bring warm light as many had hoped. It brought the suspension of consequence. In Dani's mind, the moments of unzipping files, arranging evidence, cross-checking frames would remain the silhouette of a human pressed to the wall and forced to weaponize pain. She wondered if she had gone too far or if there was a gentler path for everyone. Then the image of Bill stranded at the roadside of a conspiracy reappeared, and hesitation receded. Some moments rendered gentleness merely another name for collusion. Hayley drifted through a sleepless night, fear like a wounded animal, feral and frail at once. She confronted the truth that her motives could no longer hide behind tidy reasoning. The images she had laid out to justify her choices cracked when set against a cold timeline. In the deepest chamber of her conflict, she panicked not only at the threat of arrest but at her first clear sight of herself in the mirror. Someone who pursued personal safety by placing others at risk. That panic could germinate into remorse or harden into the fuel for a darker design, depending on the next slip of fate. Randy recalculated in silence. A game only ends when a player has no pieces left, and he still had a few. A discrete financial tie no one had traced, a dataset not yet known to exist, an intermediary who could bend the arc of the story. Those remaining pieces raised the tide of pressure, demanding a decision both swift and merciless. In the dry, habitual rage of a man trained to manage risk, Randy prepared a new variant: if white cannot be blackened, then make the entire room go dark. Dani knew the battle would not end with a knock at the door. The real fight lived in her ability to preserve the chain of custody and prevent the narrative from being warped. She drafted a post-incident map, seeking the people no one watches yet who hold keys to truth: system technicians, maintenance staff, junior accountants, the small proofs that clicked together into a chain. The machinery of truth began to rumble, and in that noise, her anger transformed into discipline. Every step logged, every tile stamped, every gap paired with a contingency built from logic. She was no longer merely a lover protecting the person she cared for, she had become the architect of a transparent structure designed to withstand the storm of deceit. After everything, Bill faced the hardest choice: accept the anesthetic of believing it was all a mistake, or confront darkness to see clearly the ones who had stood closest. He reordered his priorities: safety, justice, and grace. He wanted to grant grace to those once dear, but justice demanded a clean cut. Safety, stolen by conspiracy, could now be rebuilt only with truth. The reordering felt like forcing a broken bone back into its socket, excruciating but necessary to heal. At last, when the dust paused in midair, the real questions rose like a new shadow draping the room. Was Hayley the mastermind or merely the spark to a plan hatched in Randy's head? Did Randy act alone, or did someone stand behind him, tugging the strings of jealousy and greed? Would Dani's evidence endure the furnace of counterargument? Would Bill hold steady under emotional siege? Could the law keep pace with the speed of lies? Could a truth smudged by too many hands ever be washed clean, or only renamed into something more convenient to accept? And above all, would Dani's anger, the force that saved Bill and tore down the curtain, become a chain binding her to this memory, or a compass guiding her through the ashes to a world where boundaries of right and wrong are no longer auctioned off to appetite? In the quiet that follows a storm, Dani watched reports render line by line, counted breaths by page numbers, and understood the road ahead promises no easy rewards. Each decision had driven her, Bill, Hayley, and Randy to the cliff's edge where only true nature remains. At that rim, no one has the strength to pretend. Either they face the cost and pay it, or they plunge into the darkness of the next scheme. Because a plot only dies when no one feeds it, and a heart is only freed when it returns everything to its proper place, even if that place is a loss that can never be sutured. The questions hanging over the next chapter do not lighten. Has the truth reached sufficiency, or does an unseen hand yet remain? Will Dani push deeper to expose every layer, or stop to protect what's left? Will Hayley dissolve into remorse or calcify into something more dangerous? Will Randy retreat or counterstrike? And will Bill, standing at the center of every trajectory, become a symbol of recovery or the final wall at which every arrow aims? Only when those questions are answered can wounds scar over injustice cease to be a thin promise drifting in the cold wind of betrayal. And that's where we'll leave the board tonight, frozen at the moment before the next decisive move. Dani has transformed fury into discipline, locking down timestamps, backups, and a chain of custody that could hold in any storm. Bill stands at the fault line, no longer the victim of an accident but the survivor of a design, rebuilding his priorities around truth even as the cost threatens to hollow him out. Hayley hovers between collapse and reinvention, caught in the split second where remorse can still win or harden into something colder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. Randy has not run out of pieces, he has simply changed the shape of the game, ready to black out the room if he can't win the argument in the light. What happens next depends on whether evidence can outrun manipulation. Paper trails are powerful, but sentiment is stubborn, and reputations that took years to curate do not crumble quietly. Dani knows this. It's why she has widened her circle to the technicians, the accountants, the quiet custodians of inconvenient truth. She isn't chasing a headline, she's engineering a verdict. Yet even perfect architecture has weak points, the one witness who gets cold feet, the one file corrupted, the one procedural step a clever lawyer turns into reasonable doubt. The counterattack is coming, and it will not rely on facts alone, it will target perception, loyalty, and the human reflex to look away when the truth burns too bright. Bill's reckoning will be the axis. If he holds steady, the path forward is brutal but clear, transparency first, then healing. If he wavers, the vacuum will be filled by stories told in bad faith. He will be pressed to forgive prematurely, to call it a misunderstanding, to trade clarity for comfort. That's the trap. Recovery built on euphemisms always collapses, only the raw outline of what happened can support any future worth living. Dani can build the scaffolding, but he has to climb it. As for Hayley and Randy, the question is no longer whether they set the fuse but whether they will keep feeding the fire. A last-minute confession could turn the narrative, a documented plea could shift penalties, a single act of courage could spare years of fallout. But self-preservation is loud, and guilt has a way of dressing up as strategy. If they double down, if they push disinformation, intimidate witnesses, or weaponize the thin places in Dani's case, then the conflict moves from the shadows of intent to the battlefield of open consequence. And on that field, every choice leaves tracks. So watch the small moves in the coming days, the request for a meeting off the record, the sudden appearance of an expert with two perfect opinions, the sympathetic op-ed that reframes the entire mess as a tragic misunderstanding. Those are not random ripples, they're trial balloons, probing for weak seams. If Dani pops them quickly, momentum stays with the truth. If even one floats unchecked, expect a sky full of them. If this breakdown helped crystallize the stakes, stick around. In our next deep dive, we'll chart how a clean evidentiary chain is tested under pressure, which leverage points matter most in a reputational knife fight, and whether remorse, if it arrives at all, can rewrite the endgame. Until then, remember the core lesson of nights like this: conspiracies are engineered in silence but defeated in sequence, one document, one timestamp, one unflinching decision at a time. If you caught additional clues we missed, drop them below. If you're bracing for a twist we haven't mapped yet, tell us where you think the next crack appears. We'll be here to measure it, name it, and see who still stands when the dust finally chooses a side.